Welcome to another episode of Count Me In. I'm your host, Adam Larson, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Jeremy Bryant, founder of No Story Lost. Jeremy has had an incredible, diverse career journey, starting in accounting at PwC, moving to social entrepreneurship with his charity Meal Share, and now dedicating his efforts to helping families preserve their cherished memories through No Story Lost. In our conversation today, Jeremy opens up about the inspiration behind his ventures, sharing heartfelt stories about the importance of capturing personal narratives. He delves into how his background in accounting has shaped his career and valuable insights he's gained along the way. Jeremy also gives us a behind-the-scenes look at the emotional and impactful work he does for families, highlighting how storytelling can connect generations and create lasting legacies. Now sit back, relax, and join us as we explore Jeremy Bryant's remarkable journey right here on Count Me In. Well, Jeremy, I'm so excited to have you on the Count Me In podcast today. You have had quite the journey, whether starting in accounting at PwC to charities to real estate portfolios, and now your company, No Story Lost. And there's just a lot of things I wanted to cover with you today, but maybe we can start with what initially drew you to the world of accounting? Because it's not something that everybody can say they are excited to get into. I mean, obviously this is a podcast for people who are in accounting and finance, but not everybody, goes there. So I just wanted to, because you didn't stay there.
What are you talking about, Adam? Everybody loves accounting. First of all, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the chance to chat and share a bit of my story. Hopefully someone can learn a little bit or maybe take something away from it. But to answer the question, what got me into accounting besides everybody's underlying love for accounting is my dad was an accountant.
Okay.
So he has a firm called Bryant up here in Canada, in Calgary. And growing up, I just thought that was just the dreamiest job. Dad did it. What could be cooler than that? So early on in my life, I thought I want to be an accountant, and that carried right along until I was an accountant. But that was the start of it.
Wow, that was the start of it. So until you were an accountant, it sounds like it didn't last for very long. What kind of happened, and did you learn things that you've? So it's a two-part question. Like, what happened? Mm-hmm. But then also, have you taken things from accounting that have spanned your career?
Yes. Yeah. Great. Maybe I'll get into a bit of the story of what happened.
Sure.
When we're making it so dramatic, I really do appreciate the education and everything I learned. But I went to business school and then got out of business school and started my career in auditing.
Okay.
With PwC, and was on the kind of the CA route, so the chartered accountant route out here in Canada. But when I got into that role, so especially kind of specifically when I got into the big firm life, working with hundreds of people and working with very big companies and being a very small piece of that. For me, I felt like, I'm learning so much and getting an in-depth look at these businesses, incredibly interesting. Mm-hmm. I've taken away so much from that. But at the same time, I was feeling like that I wasn't having kind of the impact that I wanted on the overall scope. So obviously, as a junior accountant coming in, your job is pretty narrow, AR, mm-hmm. AP. And for me, that wasn't something that I found myself wanting to do for a number of years. So one of the things that I definitely learned and appreciated was just an understanding of how business works. And I've always been fascinated by businesses. That was actually, I think, what got me first interested in accounting was I saw my dad work as an accountant for a lot of small mom and pop shops and that sort of thing. And he just helped people so much figure out their business, mm-hmm. Get to see it in a different light, get to help them, strategize and plan taxes and all these kinds of things. And I thought that was amazing to help people in that way. And that needed a strong understanding of business. So all that to say, and maybe the answer is a little bit answered in both, but I got a taste of the business world, mm-hmm. fell in love with that, and thought I just love working on businesses and strategizing and seeing what's going on. And I wanted to have more of an impact over one company than I was at the time being a junior accountant on very large teams at very large companies.
Yeah, I mean, that's understandable. Like, not everybody can stay in one role their whole time. And mm-hmm. sometimes people want to expand. But what I've learned is talking to people, especially through this podcast, is a lot of people start in accounting. They, like you said, they understand the business and then they become entrepreneurs because they understand truly the whole business. Because once you understand the numbers and understand how businesses work, you can become, like, a lot of times we talk about, especially at IMA, is, becoming the business partner. You want to be that partner. That partner, you want your seat at the table, and you're more than just a numbers person when you're in the accounting and finance team. And so that's huge. And so for you, you've taken that and you've started, a charity, you've done real estate. Maybe talk a little bit about those things and some of the lessons and things you learned along the way there.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I'll jump into the charity side of things. So
sure.
When I left the accounting world, I took the leap to start a social enterprise. So started a charity.
Okay.
I started that with my cousin and my best friend, Andrew. So he was at another big firm. He was on the consulting side, but another one of the big four. And we were both feeling like, oh, we're just going to work every day and, not having that much impact and, maybe making some money for some people down the line. And that's great. But are we at the end of the day helping somebody today? And that was a little bit tough to see at times. So we said, let's take the total opposite approach. Let's start a charity. So we started a charity called Meal Share, which worked with restaurants across Canada and in the US to provide meals to youth in need.
Wow.
We put a little logo next to a couple menu items. And when somebody ordered a meal share item, they got their meal just like normal. And we would also provide one meal to youth in need. So that was about 10 years of our life that we jumped into that and grew it. Had an incredible team who came around the idea, and just some incredibly passionate people who loved what they did and were very skilled at it.
Yeah. And
that was about 10 years of our early career.
Wow. I mean, that's a fantastic cause, being able to share. I've read about other organizations doing something similar, but I think one of the biggest problems we have in the world today is hunger. And to be able to feel that, making that impact, I can totally understand wanting to do that. I have to ask, going from big time corporate, big four, to a charity, how did your accounting skills kind of help in navigating that route, especially because nonprofit is completely different from a for-profit organization?
That's a good question. Two things come to mind. One, I think, is maybe just the obvious one, that all business at the end of the day comes down to profit and expenses. So running a charity, oftentimes that was a razor thin margin.
Yeah.
And so I think understanding the numbers helped us stay afloat. There was a lot of months where we didn't know if we were going to stay afloat, and revenue was tough to get and donations were tough to get. So I think a strong understanding of kind of financials and making sure we're going to be able to make payroll this month helped us in a bunch of ways and a bunch of times. The other one that I felt was especially when we started Meal Share, it was a totally new idea. So we hadn't heard about it before, and we were going out to restaurants to pitch them on joining this program that was ultimately going to cost them a bunch of money. They were going to give us money. We were going to use it to feed youth in need. And I felt like the credibility that I gained from having an accounting background, and it helped that I was at a big four, a recognizable name, was just huge to get me in a bunch of doors.
Yeah.
I think, if a restaurant owner, any business owner getting pitched by somebody, knowing that they're an accountant or have an accounting background helps kind of, check off, okay, this person probably has an understanding of what they're talking about and has thought this through. So I felt like that was a huge help. When we started Meal Share, I was 22, maybe. So, a young kid walking into these restaurants asking for a big financial commitment. And so the credibility was a huge helper for us.
That's amazing. I mean, having the name definitely helps a lot of times. And then also being able to have the talk behind it and being able to support it with documentation and everything you need is huge. And, a lot of that comes back to having good data visualization skills, being able to tell the whole story and see the whole picture, I'm sure.
Yeah, one other thing that actually just came to mind too, when we talk about what helped us in Meal Share that we learned from the accounting world, I think would actually be going back to that feeling that I had when I felt like, I'm not having that much of an impact here. Am I really making a difference?
Yeah.
I think that was something that we focused a lot on in terms of engaging with our staff to make sure that they do know that they're having an impact, and really trying to find passionate staff for the job that we're trying to fill. I think if I've done one thing well in my career, I suspect it's been working with amazing people, people who are more talented than me in different ways and differently talented and incredibly passionate at all the companies that I've been involved with. And I think that's probably something that I learned a little bit in that experience that I had, where I wasn't feeling really engaged. I wasn't feeling like I was a super important, member of the team making a big impact. So at Meal Share and other companies, always try to do a great job at engaging with our staff to know that they're part of the success. They're making an impact. They're valued. and then make sure that, what's important to them, we're trying to focus on too. So if they want more learning opportunities or growth in different ways, we try to stay aware of that.
So maybe we can dig into that a little bit. Maybe can you give some examples on how you've done that? Because, you hear people say that a lot, making sure they feel that way. But what are some things that you did to help do that? Because it's easier to say that than to actually help them feel that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes. So one thing that I think has been important for our work, and so this holds true at MealShare, holds true at No Story Lost and other companies, is when we hire, we spend a great deal of time trying to find the perfect person for that role.
Okay.
So when we were at MealShare, our hiring site was called dreamjobs@mealshare.ca. And anybody who we hired, we tried to make sure that this role was going to be a dream job for them. So it seems a little bit crazy to me sometimes when I think, okay, I'm hiring somebody, for example, for maybe an admin role.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I wouldn't want to do this myself. I'm really bad at this. I'm not good at the details. Surely this couldn't be a dream job for anybody. But we found if we looked hard enough, we would find somebody who absolutely loved that role. Mm. And if we can do a good job articulating that role about what's important about it, what they're going to be required to do, what they need to be really great at, what they're going to get out of it. If we can do a great job at articulating that and then spend enough time looking in the right places, we're going to find somebody who at the end of the day, they say, this is my dream job. I love doing this. I love organizing information. I love, whatever task it is for the job. So I think it starts at that. A big part of it is if you have the right person in the right role, it's really easy to get people motivated and get passionate about what they're doing. So I think that's something that we did well was really think through what the role is, what the outcomes are, what we need somebody to be good at, what they're going to be spending their time doing, and then try to find strategic places where those types of people might be hanging out that we can spread the word and get them aware of the job and hopefully coming over to join.
That's really cool. I like that. I think sometimes organizations may rush into things, or it's really hard because you sell yourself one way in an interview. It's kind of like a first date, and it's almost like you need to have a few dates to get to know the person a little bit better.
Yeah. It's always funny looking at how different hiring practices are.
Yes.
Where a company like ours, we would spend an absorbent amount of time through that hiring process, getting to know people, make sure they get to know us, make sure they get to know different people on the team because they're going to be working with us. Mm-hmm. So are they going to fit in? Are they going to like who they're working with? And then getting to know them. Versus on the flip side, I talked to quite a few people who say, yeah, I guess I'll post a position on Indeed and see who shows up. And I think if the wrong person shows up, who might seem like the right person and maybe think, oh, this could be a fine job. But I think at that point, it's pretty tricky to get them really motivated and really aligned. Versus if you find that person at the beginning who, they really care about what you're doing in terms of the high level mm-hmm. goals of the organization. They care about what you care about. And that's important to them. Then I think it kind of leads to more successful outcomes. Mm-hmm. Spend more time at the beginning.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned just before about No Story Lost. That's the one, your current organization that we haven't talked about.
Yeah.
Maybe you can explain what the company does and the importance of capturing stories.
Yes. So No Story Lost is a business where we help families capture their loved ones' stories, memories, and advice. So clients purchase one of our biography packages, and then we take care of all the details. So oftentimes someone will purchase it for their mom or their dad, occasionally for themselves. And from there, we start by setting up a series of interviews with a storyteller. So we'll get mom or dad on the phone and we'll ask them all about their childhood, their best stories, their best memories. We'll ask them about their formative years. So, the time they got in trouble in high school. We'll talk to them about dating and when they met and fell in love with the one, talk to them about having kids and their career and looking back and advice. And then once we have all those, we take those and we transcribe them, clean up the writing, take out the ums and the ahs, combine different ideas. And then we'll add their family photos and lay it all out very nicely and design, print, and deliver a beautiful coffee table book right to their door. So families end up with a nice family heirloom that they can cherish and pass down through the generations to come.
Wow. So it must be interesting being able to hear all these different people's stories and being able to tell it or give it back to them in this beautiful way. What impact has that on you and the people you work with as these get developed?
Yeah, I'll start by me telling you about how we first came up with the idea of No Story Lost. For me, it was my dad got sick about 10 years ago now, just a little bit under. And he got diagnosed with cancer and had a 50% chance of surviving.
Mm-hmm.
Happy to say he's doing okay now. He got the right side of the coin on that one, and he's doing great. But at the time, it was just such a scary time for our family. He's kind of the rock of the family, so without him, we'd be a bit lost. So it's just a really scary time. And we had a camping trip that we were planning to go on, and then he got diagnosed. So I said, Dad, do you still want to go? Like, you got to go in for these chemo treatment. But he said, you know what? This was more important than ever. Let's go on the trip. So we went out camping for a couple of days. I printed off and brought with me, I think I had about 80 questions that I wanted to ask my dad. So a bunch about his childhood, how he met my mom, and all that kind of stuff. And I asked him all these questions and wrote down some notes. And I heard, of course, his classic stories, which were great. But I also heard some new ones, like things that I had never heard before, questions that just blew me away. And things that I just had no idea about my dad. And so that was just an incredible experience. I got back from that, and I called my cousin and partner on the business, Andrew, and said, man, we got to find a way to help other families get this too. Because for me, those notes and those stories that I had from my dad were so important. So it had a huge impact on me, just getting to do my dad's project. We've since done some other family members' projects. And for our customers, it's the same experience. We have, at No Story Lost, we have a happy tier guarantee, to call it. So in the early days of the business, when we first started, we were doing off the side of our plate or the side of our desk. We started to joke around about how we measured success by the number of clients who cried happy tears. And so if we had a client who called us after they got their book, we said, found out how the reveal went. And oftentimes they'd say, oh, we just wept. It was just amazing. And we just cried these happy tears. So that was our first joke at our own success, our measuring of success. But the more that we've been in the business, the more we thought, let's just formalize this. And so our promise to customers is if they are not so happy with their book when they get it, that they get to cry happy tears, we'll happily refund all their money, and have yet to need to do that. So all that to say, families are pretty thrilled when they get to see their bucks.
That's pretty amazing. That it's one of those guarantees that hopefully you'll never have to do, but it's a touching time. And if families are dealing with potential loss or, things like that, do you have to deal with the psychology side, or maybe helping deal with grieving families in that way as you're going through this? Have you had to navigate those waters at all? I'm sure that's very touchy and it's very delicate as you're dealing with families when going through those situations.
Yeah, that's been a big part of the business, I'd say, is being aware that some families are going to come to us when, dad turns 80, everybody's happy and healthy, and they just want an amazing birthday gift for him.
Yeah.
And that's great. And a whole other side is when mom gets a call from the doctor that says we found something and we don't have too long here. So we'll get lots of those kind of phone calls. A family just got bad news, and they want to get those stories before it's too late. So those are always such important projects for us. They're really meaningful. Every project is, but when we know that there's a timeline that's so visceral, it really changes it. Yeah, we've had lots of really emotional times there. We've had clients who have passed away, in some cases just after we finish their interviews, which is, super sad, and get to talk to the family and see how they're doing. And also, obviously it's nice that we know, okay, we've got these interviews secure and safe. We can still make the book, and we get to give a book that is, I think in some cases, just way more meaningful when someone's gone.
Yeah.
And other times the saddest one for us or for me is we've had this happen a few times where someone will sign up for a project and we'll say, okay, let's schedule your interviews. When works for you? They say, oh, in a couple of weeks, and have had people pass away in that meantime.
Yeah.
So that one's really tricky, just knowing that in some cases those stories kind of go away with the person. So it's tough being with the family after that and talking to them. But and obviously lots of emotional projects, and then again, a whole bunch of ones that are just really happy and just happy emotion. None of the other kind of sad emotions mixed in with that.
Yeah, I can see it's had a huge impact. Just your face as you're talking about it, is just, I can see the emotion and the impact that it's had on you. And that it gets me excited. I love stories. I love hearing stories. I love listening to stories. And it also makes me think of how many stories have been lost throughout the centuries. If you look at the history books, most times the victors are the one who write the history books.
That's right.
So you don't get the other side of the story.
Yeah.
And I think what you're doing is hugely important, because a lot of times when you're growing up, you don't actually always hear everything that's happened. And then suddenly, randomly, one time you're sitting with somebody like you with your dad, you hear something new you haven't heard before. And you're like, wait, I want more of that.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a huge impact, because I think telling the right story, whether in business or personal. I mean, obviously no story loss is more a personal thing, but telling the right story is huge no matter where you are, and being able to tell stories. And maybe for our listeners, you can give some advice on, how do you tell a good story? Because, whether you're in business or whether they want to, check the link in the bio. If you want to check out No Story Lost, we'll have it in there, but we'll totally have it in there for the audience. But, if you want to tell a good story, what are some pointers you can give our audience?
So one of the things that comes to mind, and again, this is kind of similar to another story I shared, but going back to the basics and thinking through it at the beginning.
Okay.
One thing that's really important to us always is who's the audience. And we have a lot of families that they'll say, oh, we'd love to do this for grandpa. We're going to get him to do a project. And then they'll come back to us in 2 weeks and say, we talked to grandpa and, he says he doesn't have any good stories to tell. He's not really sure if he wants to chat about him. He doesn't feel like his life's interesting. We say, no, grandpa, think about the audience. It's your grandkids. In that case, any story that you have is going to be exciting for your grandkids or your kids. And so in business, I think it's the same way. If a founder, maybe there's a founder-led company and they're starting to wonder, he's going to retire or she's going to retire in the next handful of years. Let's get a couple of stories down about the early side of the business. They might think, it wasn't that exciting. We started in a garage and then in my buddy's basement and that sort of thing. But I think thinking through the audience, you're not telling yourself the story. You don't need to impress yourself. You're telling someone who cares about the business or cares about you as a person. And so I think that's really helpful. I think thinking about the audience is a good place to start for any story. Yeah. And then with that in mind, so specifically what we do at No Story Lost is we really are more on that family side focus. We do some corporate stories, but our bread and butter is talking to parents and grandparents.
For sure.
So I think, thinking through things like what was different when you grew up. For talking to my dad, he's only, not quite 70. He's probably getting up there. But for him, maybe growing up doesn't seem that remarkable. But when he tells me a story about how he used to go down to Main Street, trade his bike in for the day for a horse for another kid who brought a horse to Main Street and they swapped for the day. That's just mind blowing for me. That just doesn't happen in today's day and age. So I think, when he thinks about stories, if we say, okay, what, think about me, think about my little girl one day reading it, tell stories about, that are just going to blow her mind when she doesn't have the same thing that you grew up with. So yeah.
That's really cool. Yeah. I used to have a phone that had a cord attached to it. It was crazy. And you had to dial it. Yeah. Which for those of us that experience that, it's not remarkable, but thinking ahead 10, 20 years, what is a cord? That's the first question there's going to be. Yeah. Yeah. What is a cord? Nothing has cords. What is that?
Yeah.
Plugging in? I don't understand.
That's going to be how we age ourselves. Cords, I guess.
I mean, so what do you see in the future for No Story Lost? Sorry. What do you see in the future for No Story Lost? Are you guys going to get, virtual reality versions of your stories going on in the future, or what are you planning?
Yes, there's so many possibilities. One of the things we've talked a lot about is that customers come to us in personal experience. So there's some other products out there that people can do by themselves, or they can try and get mom and dad to write down their stories. We are kind of a white glove service where when a family comes to us, we say, we will take care of everything. There's not going to be a hiccup here. We have our happy tier guarantee that you can rely on. So I think for us, we will continue to focus on that personal touch. So matching a family with the perfect interviewer, then the perfect writer, and make sure that we take that seamlessly through. So to be honest, I think the future for No Story Lost right now just looks like more of what we're doing, helping more families, we hope, capture their loved ones' stories. But fast forward 5 years, who knows? Maybe we will be doing, VR stories, but I suspect customers are going to continue to come to us for what they love, which is coffee table books that they can share with friends and family around the the dinner table, around the coffee table, and keep that personal touch.
That's amazing. Well, Jeremy, it was so great getting to know you and hearing your story a little bit. And I look forward to our audience checking out No Story Lost. And it was really great to meet you. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. Anybody can reach out to us at our website, nostorylost.com. And if anyone's interested, we'd love to help capture your guys' stories.
This has been Count Me In, IMA's podcast, providing you with the latest perspectives of thought leaders from the accounting and finance profession. If you like what you heard and you'd like to be counted in for more relevant accounting and finance education, visit IMA's website at www.imanet.org.